on what's happening right now. Nan Hayworth, I'll give you the first opportunity to respond.
Yes, Rob, it's remarkable, isn't it, that even when nominally they got their president elected, I guess, not that, Joe Biden sought the support of the Antifa crowd, but it's amazing that nothing seems to satisfy them. And Ted Wheeler is the Neville Chamberlain for the 2020s. Chamberlain thought he could appease the Nazis, and of course that failed terribly. And Ted Wheeler has now been arrested or booked, I think, for having tried to assault someone who was confronting him at a restaurant. So Ted Wheeler has won no love for having accommodated these people in ways that have dreadfully hurt the people of his city. And the latest is that there was, and I don't know if this was in any way related to the street protests, but there was a hit and run for something like 20 blocks in the city of Portland, in which one person was killed and 5 others were injured. Portland is a city that seems to be ungoverned and ungovernable. And this should trouble us all. We don't need to defund the police. We need to make sure that public safety actually means something in every community. President Trump was a champion for that. Joe Biden has not been a champion for that. He is a tool of the left, and unfortunately, we're all going to suffer.
And Emerald, I'll tell you what. Yeah, it's Seattle too. Seattle used to be known for like 2 things: coffee and like Microsoft, Bill Gates. That's what I think of when I think of Seattle. Now I think Chop and Chaz. I saw Jen Psaki.
I know, that is true.
Yeah, I saw the Jen Psaki speaking yesterday. She actually said this during one of her inaugural press conferences. She said, "I haven't even spoken to the president about the rioting out there." It shocked me. There hasn't even been a conversation yet.
I think that was shocking for a lot of people. She was asked about the situation in the Northwest yesterday. She sort of gave a blanket statement, but nothing really strong or specific to what has been going on there. And clearly the president hasn't made a strong statement either. And why that is particularly concerning is that he has directed his director of national intelligence to specifically look into domestic terrorism. And if I got a second question yesterday, I wanted to ask Jen Psaki about that and about, is this looking at domestic terrorism on all sides? Because the fact that they haven't condemned violence by leftist extremists in a strong way gives concern when you're talking about what they are looking into and what measures they might take.
And Emerald, have you noticed any favoritism with the questions, by the way, that you were able to ask? I noticed they're going to a lot of the same old faces and not the our Newsmax representatives.
I think that happens with any administration or office, or they have their picks and who they prefer to take questions from most often. But I did get a question.
Yes. Steve Clemons, I want to know what you think about all this. I mean, shouldn't the president be addressing this at some point here? Or is it just going to continue on and on and on?
No, I think he absolutely needs to make a statement that violence and vandalism, whether folks are animated by what they think the right is. Look, I don't want to fall into the camp of calling right-wing violence part of the conservative movement, or the Antifa violence what we see as part of what the Democrats or left embrace. Absolutely, violence and vandalism should get a statement from the President of the United States, and I imagine he will make that statement. But it's one of these things where right now, when you look at the tumult in the country, and you look at people thinking that they have a legitimacy in taking these violent acts and committing vandalism, I'm outraged by it, and I hope that folks I know in the White House are. I suspect they are. But yeah, it deserves a response. And I think to Emerald's point, when they do charge the Director of National Intelligence for looking at the spread of conspiracy theories by hate groups and domestic terror organizations that are organized with purpose, that has to happen across the spectrum. It would be an outrage if it happened only on so-called one. I mean, I hate even calling it on side of the spectrum. It's outrageous. It doesn't belong to be talked about being a conservative, fascist group or a leftist fascist group.
Steve Cortes, I'll give you a reaction, then I've got a question for Amir.
Sure. I think here's the unfortunate reality. Those of us on the right have been universal in condemning violence that was that was instituted by people who are in MAGA hats. I mean, if you wear a MAGA hat and you attack supposedly in the name of America First and you attack cops at the Capitol, you are a thug and a criminal. And again, we've been universal in that condemnation. You do not see, unfortunately, that same kind of reprobation on the left. And I'll give you a very specific example. Chris Cuomo, and I know because I was working at CNN at the time, and he and I argued about this a lot on air. Chris Cuomo repeatedly was an apologist for Antifa. He said it was, quote, a good cause. He even put up a tweet comparing Antifa to our soldiers who landed at D-Day. So here you have a major figure of the corporate media, and I would argue of the political left, who is making excuses for, and in some ways even inspiring, leftist political street violence. So there is a key difference here. I'll tell you another difference that's more real time to today. We were told, according to the new rules of the corporate media, that what happened at the Capitol was an insurrection. But why is this not regarded as an insurrection? They're also attacking government buildings, specifically ICE facilities in the Northwest. Is this also an insurrection? If we're going to use those kinds of incredibly loaded terms, then it should also certainly apply to what's happening in the Pacific Northwest right now.
Yeah, the Capitol insurrection was a matter of hours. This has been going on for 6 days now since the inauguration. So a stark difference, even though it's not happening at the U.S. Capitol. We get it. It's still terrible to see. Amir, I want to pivot and just talk to you quickly about what's going on.